It's time to play Eventing Manager. Compete against your friends for your country and win prizes using the fantasy football-styled Eventing Manager game. It is free to download in your App Store or on Google Play, and you can play along with eventing fans all over the world in picking your dream team. Pick carefully though, your $10 million budget sounds big, but you'll want to spend it carefully. Or if you prefer, you can let the computer do the picking for you. Once you've selected your team, then don't forget to check out the featured leagues to be in with a chance of winning some amazing prizes. For more information, go to www.echoratings.com. Welcome to the Echo Ratings Eventing Podcast. Welcome to the Echo Ratings Eventing Podcast, and it is the Bicton review show for you listeners. I'm getting my words all in a muddle because I have basically spoken solidly for 3 whole days. I hope you enjoyed all of the Bicton coverage as much as we did, and we are going to be looking back at some of the highlights. I am joined by a lady making her Eventing Podcast debut. It is none other than To the Barnes, Tara Glenn.
Lovely to be here with you, especially as I saw you at Bicton as well.
I know. Well, that was, we've both been at Bicton all weekend. And to be honest, I kind of wanted to capture the excitement because we are both still buzzing about it. Let's go back to the beginning and I guess give our first impressions of Bicton. Have you ever been before? What did you think when you first arrived last week?
No, I do know Bicton. I've even actually competed there myself, so I'm familiar with getting a horse round those hills, admittedly not on a 10-minute course, which is what they had in the long at the weekend. But Helen went up another gear, without a doubt. The organisers, the place was presented beautifully. The fact they'd moved the show jumping to the larger arena, it had a real high-class feel, almost a European feel. They've done a superb job.
They really had. I arrived and I have to admit, I set off early Friday morning, fully thinking that I was going to get caught in lots of traffic. And it was like the gods were looking down on me, and I sailed all the way down into Bicton, which left me with a couple of hours of extra time to, I guess, soak it up. And I just wandered around, and it was like a breath of fresh air in terms of recent years. There weren't a huge amount of people there, but it was enough to give it a bit of atmosphere. At the start of the week, it was just owners, connections, and the press, those sorts of people that were on site. They opened up to limited numbers of the public over the weekend, but 2 sides of the dressage arenas, which were on a very, very good surface, were set below, sort of with banks up 2 sides and then trees around the other side. So there was sort of this really nice amphitheatre about it, and it had a really good atmosphere, and the chatter around the cross-country course was unreal. So Helen West had built a properly tough 4-star track, and I have to admit, I think she was exceptionally brave, because it was her first 4-star track that she had built. She's obviously ridden up to that level, and is hugely experienced anyway. Captain Mark Phillips had, as she said on the podcast last week, just been there to kind of take a look at it and make sure that everything was as it should be. But it was a serious track. And I think one thing that took a lot of people by surprise, Tara, certainly, I guess I'm a little bit more familiar with the kind of the Devon countryside, and so the hills didn't totally shock me, but I know it did a lot of people. The terrain played a huge part.
It really did take a lot of people by surprise. It was fascinating. If I'm not letting the cat out of the bag and telling people who won, if they hadn't been following so far, but talking to Nicola Wilson at the end, who comes from Yorkshire, Bramham on her doorstep, is used to hills. It took her by surprise.
I think it was one of those, though, that Helen used them. They became the sort of the extra test to the cross country, and it was almost like Bramham at Bicton. I mean, Bicton, the replacement fixture, they had 7 weeks to put on this incredible show, and they absolutely nailed it. And I would say, Helen West, you have my absolute respect, because it was a tough track. I thought it rode brilliantly in terms of rewarding really good positive riding. There were plenty of problems. I think it would be fair to say, Tara, that a number of people perhaps hadn't had the preparation. They hadn't been to the Chatsworths or any events like that as part of their preparation. And so therefore were a little bit less prepared than they would be normally in these sort of strange times.
I would agree with that. There were a few green rides out there, but on the whole, and as you say, a huge congratulations to Helen, because it was a very safe track. Although it was very testing, there was nothing tricky. There was certainly nothing nasty. And it was a really fair challenge. I think also what was so complimentary to Helen, and the riders said it, but what was interesting is both Lucinda Green and Mary King, such experienced cross-country riders, were singing the track's praises, and they were saying, it's just fantastic to see something like this back on the scene. I mean, we're obviously we're devoid of decent competition, having been through this pandemic, and so we were dying for a good competition, but it produced even more than our expectations had hoped for.
Yeah, it did. And you know what? Jesse Campbell made a really good point. He was on one of the Bicton diaries, and it's only sort of 6 or 7 minutes, listeners. If you haven't heard it, go and hear his thoughts. But it was essentially, he's been out to Kentucky and he has walked a big 5-star track already this year. Whereas a lot of riders, it might have been, Burley, Bramham, 2019, that they were walking these big tracks. So it does take you by surprise a little bit. But I would say it jumped on the whole really well. We saw Spencer Sturmey and myself were obviously doing the horse and country commentary throughout the weekend, and we really saw a lot of horses, even if they'd had an early mistake, finishing so much more confident, sort of boys becoming men and girls becoming women. It just, they grew as the course went on.
So I think I'd like to say as well, there's something almost about the course, harking back to the days of Frank Weldon at Badminton. He would set really tough challenges, but would always make sure that there was a decent alternative. Nowadays we have the black flag, whereby if you had that slightly greener horse, you would have an opportunity to get home and have that confidence run. And Helen was very clever with several of the tricky combinations. There was a really fair alternative, which added a lot of time, but allowed you to get your greener horse home.
Yeah, and they were almost a sort of an easier version of the question that she was actually asking. Anyway, I'm totally in awe of the cross-country track. I absolutely loved it. And the whole event had a huge, huge feel around it. We'll come on to it and sort of our lasting impressions of it a little bit later. But let's talk about some of the winners. We will start with the 4-star long format, who I'm just going to say, I put up on the preview podcast. It's very rare this happens, Tara. Very rare that I get any sort of anything right. But Nicola Wilson, yeah, exactly. Nicola Wilson, JL Dublin actually won. They led from the front in all 3 phases. And I would say I did Nicola a disservice because I said she might be a little bit off the pace after the first phase, but would make up for it in the jumping phases. I don't feel too bad in so much as Pippa Room from Horse and Hound also said exactly the same thing. And we both admitted that we were completely wrong because she led from the dressage. And she did give us a slightly heart-stopping moment because there was a really influential corner at 24A, and it was a left-handed brush corner coming down a quite a steep hill. And there was 15 penalties for a potential missed flag put on her card, which was then removed once it had been reviewed by the ground jury. But our angle was side on, so we didn't see obviously what the ground jury were going to be able to see. So that kept us on our toes for a little while. But I would say this horse, Tara, was unbelievably impressive, and it was good to see Nicola back. I think that was her first long format 4-star win since, I want to say, Blair in 2016.
No, it was definitely lovely to see Nicola back on form, and JL Dublin clearly came out of the cross-country phase really well. Nicola prepared him beautifully because his show jumping round was faultless at the end, and there was a huge cheer that went up from that crowd watching around the arena when she did win. It was great.
She's a popular winner. She's a very popular. And actually, considering there was so much experience in the field, the younger horses stepping up really I guess, made their mark. Lordship's Graffalo, Ros Cantor, who I know Spike mentioned on the preview show, they finished on their dressage score of 30.6. I think Ros might have been a little bit disappointed with her dressage, perhaps would have preferred to have been in the 20s, but all of the marks were actually quite high. So she was fairly well placed with that. I know she scored, I think it was a 21 at Aston Lawal's last time out, but she finished on her dressage score and was absolutely superb. I think there were 4 combinations that finished on their dressage score. Of which Nicola and Ros were 2 of them. Gemma
And Gemma
Tattersall,
too, yes.
oh, I have to admit, she was one of my absolute highlights of Saturday's cross country, Tara, because she just showed pure brilliance in that phase.
I do agree. I love watching her jump, and obviously she's show jumping, doing pure show jumping as well. So she goes into the final phase with such confidence as well. And she was half of those that got round double clears inside the time, and I think she even had the quickest time of the day on chilly night as well.
Quickest time of the day, she could have gone round half the course again. She honestly absolutely flew. So the time was 10 minutes and 8, and she was, which was tight. By this point, there weren't many. Yeah. I think 1 or 2 had gone inside, but it was tough, really tough going. And Little Chilly Night comes out, and Alfie just absolutely motors round, and she comes home nearly 30 seconds inside the time. And she said afterwards, she was like, I didn't actually mean to go that fast. He was just absolutely flying. But I would say on that point, though, the ground conditions were as basically close to perfect as you could have got it. The team watered heavily all night, both on the Friday night before the long cross country and on the Saturday night before the 4-star short cross country. There were just tankers going and going and going, and they used the vertidrainer. They put so much effort into it, and I know it was hugely appreciated by everybody, and it meant that we could see some of these really good horses actually having their foot down. Was there anybody else that stood out for you? We could mention so many names, but we'll move on to the other.
There were 2 that I quickly like to mention. I thought Kirsty Chabert, with her 4th position, I thought she did a brilliant job, and I believe it's her best result ever at this level as well on Classic 6.
I think you could be right. While we're talking, I can double check that, to be fair. I thought she actually had one of the rounds of the day in the cross country. She was very, very impressive. And to be honest,
there was also William Fox Pitt, talking about young horses, had the lovely Grafenac, who's a mare, unusually for William, and is only 9, and did a really solid cross country. And William, at the end, said that he really feels this horse can now step up to 5-star after that performance.
Okay, cool. That's really interesting. Okay, so Kirsty Johnston has had previously as well another 4th place finish, an equal 4th place finish at Stragom in the 4-star long format with WTTL Opposition Skylaw back in 2017, I think it was. But I would say, I imagine this performance, if you put it on a high performance rating, would have been a higher performance. So yes, she was very, very impressive. I would say Laura Collett had 2 inside the top 12 and was very impressive. And also I would just mention Lauren Innes and Global Fission M, who finished in 11th and were absolutely over the moon, completely delighted, and I think is one that we'll be looking forward to watching through the rest of the season. So another nice name in there for you listeners. Okay, let's move on to the under 25s, because I feel like that could just be all about one young lady, Bobby Upton, who on Saturday, she was 2nd and 3rd after the dressage with her 2 rides, Cola and Cannavaro. And on Saturday put in 2 incredible cross-country performances. She wasn't entirely sure that Cannavaro was going to tackle the hills. He'd obviously done his first long format at Burnham Market last year, but it was a very, very different track. So I think she was a little bit unsure as to how he would feel. But he stormed home, picked up a few time penalties, but held on to a very, very good position, and in the end ended up going into the show jumping in 2nd. But Cola, her 2nd ride of the day, who was the higher placing after dressage, was the round of cross country for me on Saturday. He was just absolutely class. And I think she'll be, obviously elated, Tara, because she ended up winning the class with Cannavaro with a clear round. So she went in first and second. So she knew she'd won when she went in with Cola. Had 3 poles down with Cola, which I'm sure Bubby is such a competitor she would have been disappointed with. But she's been knocking on the door of sort of these stepping up the levels. She's been getting some really good, consistent 4-star short results. And I feel like this is a name that everybody just needs to keep watching because she really is as good as we think she is.
Oh, no, without doubt. And she's only 22. She's had so much experience so far for just those 22 years. And I think what's also lovely is she's produced these horses herself. So she's clearly really good horsewoman. And she's definitely one for the future. She will be representing our country at championships, no doubt.
Yeah, and she was there in the end of the cross country, washing them off. She's very, very hands-on. She only has a very small string because she's sort of combines her eventing with studying for a degree. She's at Edinburgh University, I think, and so she sort of juggled two, and remarkable. But she was first and fourth on the final placings. Heidi Coy had 3 horses, and actually was around cross country that Spencer and I were unbelievably impressed with Rassal Z, who was actually, I think, sourced originally by DHI Event Horses. And she was one of those riders that went out and she just gave it a jolly good crack. She was so positive and it paid off for her.
No, totally. I think she's also another one to watch, and another one who's produced her horses who I know she doesn't have a big budget to spend. So again, great horsewoman and another one to watch for the future.
There's a lot of them, aren't there, Tara? They just keep popping up. There's the under 25s class was seriously hot. Yazing and Banzai de Loire, the horse that won the 8 and 9-year-old class at Burnham Market last year, was the dressage leader. Few time penalties, but actually ended up finishing in third still. Was very, very classy. Yaz rode a very, very sensible ride cross country, and it was a definite plan that she went out, I think, to take a couple of long routes. Which must have been hard because she was in the lead. She was trying to defend her title that she won at Bramham for the under-25s in 2019. But showing a lot of maturity, because this is a horse that I know they are very much thinking of for Paris 2024. 24? Is it 24? Yes, it is 24.
It will be 24, yeah.
The years are all confused in my head now because of the old the fact that we're still calling Tokyo 2020 and it's in 2021, and can't cope. Who else in the under 25s caught your eye?
I think that Phoebe Locke deserves a shout out as well. She was one of only very few double jumping clears in the class, but interestingly, she's also she's actually a show jumper turned eventer. And with her horse, Bellagio d'Equipage, they did another very mature round because she intentionally cocked up some time fault there. But I think all these young riders are riding with great maturity, and I think the future is very bright for British eventing going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a whole host of names we could mention. In terms of those riders that we featured on the eventing podcast Bicton Diaries, which you can go back and hear their thoughts. Alex Kennedy, Global Milcham JJ did exactly what they needed to do, and that was the coolest little horse cross country. He was so much fun, and they really sort of helped each other out. And she got her minimum eligibility requirement run, which was the MER that she was after. Felicity Collins, RSH contender, was delighted with the horse, picked up 20 penalties. We didn't see that on the live stream, so I think she'd be, it's frustrating, but he looked class around the rest of the course. And, there were plenty of problems out there. She would far from being alone with it. Now, the 4-star short section, which was basically a who's who of British eventing. It was like a British team shootout as to who might get on the plane to Tokyo. Now, let's talk our winner first off. Tom McEwen, Toledo de Cursa, Tara, is just incredibly good.
He's a fantastic horse. He has been a to the barn favourite forever, and to see him taking the top spot there, we were just thrilled for Tom and all his connections. Superb result.
Yeah, there was a good deal of pressure on the British riders, actually, because there were a lot of eyes on them. The course was causing plenty of problems. Toledo definitely had his own opinions. I think he'll come on for the run because he was very, very fit and very much looking for, he would have happily gone round again and probably still gone inside the time. Kitty King Vangelet Biatz actually came in second. So yay, Kitty.
It was really 5.1 of a penalty.
I know.
So close.
That is literally a tiny, I don't know what it would equate to in terms of marks, but it's probably like 1 mark in the dressage, which if you think across 3 judges.
Yeah. And you and Spencer had us on the edges of our seats because Spencer originally thought that Tom had been given a time fault or two. And
yes.
Was he not?
No. So essentially what happened, I think it was me that he took a pull coming down to the last, but I don't think he really had planned to take, because I think Toledo was seeing one stride, he was seeing another stride. And so he and Roz were on the same score. So basically he wanted to finish as close to the optimum time as possible. And I thought when the clock ticked over on our live scoring, he picked up 0.4, that pull had cost him. Obviously, absolutely the right thing to do because you've got to jump the fence. But he was going very, very close to that 7 minutes. And it's always the risk you run, isn't it? You can go close, but actually you don't want to flirt with it too much, because if it goes the wrong way, 1 second is all it takes, and you've got 0.4 of a penalty. So yes, the penalty came on, and then it took 30 seconds or so before it refreshed and was confirmed, and it disappeared again. But yeah, it was a moment. And actually from that point he then couldn't be beaten because Roz was going out on course. But even though they were on the same score, even if Roz had finished in a 7 minutes exactly, which was the optimum time, so would have been equal on cross-country time, which is where you go to split the penalties in an international competition, you then go to the fastest round in the show jumping. And Tom was about 4 seconds faster than All-Star B in the show jumping, so Tom couldn't be beaten by that point. The names were just absolutely huge. Kitty King.
I can't remember seeing such an all-star lineup as we had in this 4-star short competition. I mean, if these were racehorses being rated, they'd all be well over 160. It's incredible.
Yeah, and it was brilliant in so much as pretty much everybody was putting their foot down. And it wasn't just the Brits that were looking to impress the team selectors. Chris Burton, Quality Purdy, ended up in 6th, and I've no doubt there will be conversations about taking her to Tokyo. There were 2 Irish riders in the top 12 as well, Austin O'Connor, Colorado Blue, and then Fred Scala, Everon Vivendi, who was very, very impressive and jumped a super double clear that I'm sure will be causing plenty of chat. Amanda Pottinger for New Zealand as well was one to just throw a mention out for, because she put in a really, really good cross-country round, was a couple of seconds over the time and that was it. But it was a really cool little horse and she had a super ride. So what was your highlight, Tara, of the weekend?
So many. Of the weekend?
Yeah.
I think it had to be the cross-country course. It had us all in awe. It was so perfectly designed and built and presented. You've talked about the going. I think that Helen and her team, absolutely 10 out of 10 gold star. Incredible.
Yeah, they really did do a great job. And I would say, as I said at the start of the show, Helen was brave, because there is a lot of pressure when you build a course such as this, and you've got horses that are some of the best in the world looking for Tokyo selection. So you've got to make it tough enough. And then you've got horses who, haven't had the preparation or have perhaps had a more straightforward time of the last few months and back end of last year.
For many, it was their first 4-star long.
Yes,
and I talked to Helen, and you said how experienced she is, and this came to the fore because she felt she had an obligation to make sure that those that were gaining qualifications here, which would set them up for, say, Burghley, were really ready for Burghley, and she really wanted it to be a test that would prepare these combinations for their first 5-star.
I think that makes an excellent point, and I echo it completely, because ultimately this, as we've said on the show before, and I know that plenty of people have raised it's all very well getting a minimum eligibility requirement and they play their parts 100%, but you want it to be a good enough, strong enough track to know that you are ready for that step up, to feel that actually you're prepared and there's, you'll have learned something from it. There might be some homework you need to take away, but you are ready. Because that is ultimately making the sport safer and more successful in the future. I have to admit, it was the best weekend of eventing that I have seen in years. And it felt like eventing was back. All of the big names were there, but it were there, and there were some really, really impressive performances from younger riders that had, stepped up the levels. There was one lady in the 4-star short, I think it was. Her horse was 24, and they were doing their first, and she said definitely their last 4-star short. So there were all these incredible stories. She jumped clear as well. I think it was clear. She definitely completed. So there were all these incredible stories, but it just felt like proper eventing was back. And if you haven't watched it, listeners, go and check out on H&C Plus on demand, because it is all available to go back all the way through to the first horse inspection, but all the cross country as well. Just relive it. It was absolutely brilliant. And I look forward, Tara, to hopefully more Bictons in the future.
Well, there was a lot of debate around the last prize giving, including some quite senior people from the British setup, as to whether there is room in the calendar for a third 4-star long competition. And everybody felt that that there should be made room for it. And certainly also with the sad loss of Tattersalls in Ireland, which would normally happen at the end of May, this could probably be a welcome addition.
Yeah, absolutely. I have to admit, I think that would be, I really hope the event continue to get an event such as this, because they deserve it. They put on a great show. I think it's also good for other events because it raises the bar. It's always good to have competition. Competition is healthy, keeps everybody on their toes. They all want to get better. And so I think it's good for the sport in that way as well. And I would also just mention Cheddington, who came on board as title supporters of Bicton. They had 7 weeks to put on this event in replacing Bramham, and Cheddington came on board, and Geoffrey Guy and Kate Guy, his wife, are huge supporters of the sport anyway. Chris Burton rides for them. He's based at Cheddington. They have incredible facilities, but to have people who are so supportive of the sport and want to drive it forward is everything that we need. And I don't think that should be discounted at all, because they played a huge part in making it a success. So a big thank you and a big shout out to them as well. Tara, before we go, I can't pick an individual highlight of Bicton. I think I'm just going to say that eventing is back with a bang, and I loved it.
Correct.
But tell anybody that isn't familiar with To the Barn a little bit about them, because they may have seen you in the Eventing Manager featured leagues. But for anybody who isn't familiar, where can they find you, and why should they come and give you a look?
We are To the Barn, or number 2 The Barn, and we are a digital equestrian platform. We're serving all disciplines in equestrian and all countries. We have a marketplace where brands are have their products available to everybody and have exclusive special offers on products. And we have a online booking system as well, which is available for organisers and riders organising clinics. And it's the latest in equestrian technology. So go take a look.
There you go. Go and give them a look, listeners. I would just say, before I do wrap up the Bicton show, that I would just put a special shout out for our very own Hannah Sparkles Watson, who at the weekend had a super spin around a national event in Ireland with Horseware Arda Highlight, who husband Sam rode to that infamous silver medal at the World Equestrian Games in 2018. And it was exactly 1,000 days after the silver medal in WEG with Sam that Sparks gets on board, and the horse had a few injury problems, but he was back, and they had a super spin to take the win at Kilgilkey. So Sparks, well
Lovely,
done,
Julie.
and Team Watson, well done, because it really does mean it just puts all of the hard work in. Sparks will have spent so many hours and hours and hours, giving the horse absolutely everything that he could ever wish for. So for them to be able to go out and have some fun is really special. Tara, thank you so much. It has been a pleasure. Bicton was brilliant, all of the bees, and we'll look forward to more in the future.
Lovely to chat to you, Nicole, and definitely look forward to more of that in the future.
Listeners, we hope you enjoyed a little recap of Bicton. Don't forget, you can go and watch it all back. We will have a really, really exciting week coming up because it is Le Moulin 5-star. So stay tuned. We'll have the preview show for you. We'll have lots of behind the scenes. You will be able to play eventing manager, which the market, by the time this show goes out, I think the market will be open around mid-afternoon on Tuesday. So if you want to pick your team early, then you will get all of the best deals on all of the riders. Prices go up depending on how popular combinations are. So get in early to make sure you don't miss out. And we will bring everything to you here on the Echo Ratings Eventing podcast. But a big thank you to Tara. Go and check out To the Barn, and we'll be back soon with more.